folks, we'll get started here. Again, if you didn't hear this, if you're going to speak today, please come up to the lectern and sign in. And then Charlie will swear everyone in here shortly. So, Georgetown-Scott County Planning Commission agenda, March 10th, 2022. Start meeting at 6 o'clock. Under commission business, the approval of the February invoices. Before I start, just let everyone know we have two of our commissioners absent, Mary Singer and, oh, that's it. Oh, just Mary Singer, and this is an empty seat that should be filled here hopefully shortly. Thank you, Gordon. So I need approval of the February invoices.
So moved.
Got a motion by Mr. Mifflin.
Second.
Second by Dan Smith. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Approval of the February 10th minutes.
So moved.
I got a motion by Dan Smith.
Second.
Second by Mr. Stone. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval of the March 10th agenda. And we do have, and we'll cover postponements and withdrawals in a second, so we do have a couple changes there. So I need a motion just to approve the agenda for tonight. Got a motion by David Vest.
Second.
Second by Dan Smith. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Items for postponement and withdrawal. Please take note because we do have a lot of postponements tonight. I'll go through them. PDP 2021-53 online transport, that's being postponed. So if you're here for online transport, that's being postponed. PDP 2019-45 Bluegrass Campground, that's being postponed. So if you're here to hear that one, that won't be here tonight. FSP-2022-02 Butler Property, final subdivision plat to subdivide one 5-acre lot, leaving a remainder of 78 acres located at 1741 Bond Pike. That is actually being postponed. So if you're here to hear that, we won't be hearing that tonight. PSP-2022-05 Village and Lane Run Amended Master Plan, that also is being postponed.
Okay.
Also, ZMA-2022-12, the Pickett property, zoning map amendment to change the zoning district from R2 to B2 located at 100 Markham Drive, which is a public hearing that was withdrawn. So my understanding, that's not being postponed, that is being withdrawn. So yeah, so we won't be hearing that one tonight either. The PSP 2022-14 and the PDP 2022-15, the Singer property, that's also being postponed. So again, we have about 7 postponements. So if you're here to hear any of those, we will not be discussing or hearing those tonight. Anything else, Joe, or is that it? Okay, so that's it. We need, so that's the items for postponement and withdrawal. I guess we don't need a motion on that, correct? Consent agenda. We have a lot of these applications that are consent agenda, and I think we'll do them one at a time just out of respect for everybody. The first one I've got is FSP-2022-07, the Beckett property. It's a final subdivision plat to subdivide 15, at least can you grab the door for me? Thanks. FSP-2022-07 Beckett property, final subdivision plat to subdivide 15.53 acre parent tract into 3 tracts and to transfer 0.31 acres to an adjoining property located at 4642 Muddy Ford Road. So is anybody here against that, or do you want to hear it?
I want to hear, I just have questions.
Do you want to, I'll go through the other ones, do you want to maybe at least go and talk with her in the hallway and answer a few, she'll answer a few questions for you,
Okay.
and then as long as you're okay with her answers, then we'll still come back and maybe vote it as consent. So Lisa,
Okay.
you go out in the hallway with her? Thank you, hon. Next one that's consent eligible is FSP-2022-08, 381 Finnell Pike, final subdivision plat to subdivide a 16.97 acre parent tract into 2 lots and a remainder located at 381 Finnell Pike. Is anybody here to hear this one?
381 and 318.
It's says 381. Is it,
Oh, three, it's my property.
is it 381 or
381.
It is.
381.
Okay. Anybody here against that one or want to hear that one? If not, that's consent eligible. I'll entertain a motion to approve that one consent. We got, is that you doing? We got a motion by Mr. Garrett,
Second.
second by Dan Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Sir, you can come up here to speak to the attorney and he'll have you sign the appropriate documents. Thank you. Next on the consent agenda is FSP 2022-09, 3394 Cincinnati Pike, final subdivision plat to subdivide an existing lot into 2 lots on Cincinnati Road east of Mallard Point subdivision. Is there anybody here against that one or wants to hear that one? So if not, we'll entertain a motion to vote this one consent.
So moved.
Got a motion by Mr. Mifflin, second by Mr. Garrett. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Whoever's here for that property, please come up for the 3394 Cincinnati Pike property, and Charlie will have you sign the appropriate documents. Thank you, dear. FSP 2022-09. Oh, I'm sorry. FSP 2022-10. Stone Lane Farms Lot 4, final subdivision plat to subdivide 26.3 acre lot into 2 lots and transferring and consolidating about 6.8 acres to an adjoining lot. Is there anybody here against that one?
I just have questions about it because I'm.
Joe, would you go and talk to this lady out in the hallway, and then if he doesn't answer all your questions, we'll hear it. Thanks, Joe. There's a couple people out there. We're moving it. All right, so that's still the FSP 2022-11, the Handyman property, final subdivision plat to subdivide 1 5-acre lot from a 106-acre parent tract located at 3469. Thanks, Joe. Cincinnati Pike. Anybody here that wants to hear that? Okay. There's no one here who wants to hear that. We'll entertain a motion to approve that consent agenda.
So moved.
Got a motion by Dan Smith, second by Mr. Garrett. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Sir, you come on up here and Charlie have you sign the appropriate documents. Thank you. Okay, next, PDP 2022-13, the Universal Piping Industries preliminary development plan for 100,000 square foot industrial building and an 8,000 square foot office with a 50,000 square foot expansion area in Lanes Run Business Park on Enterprise Way. Is anybody here that's opposed to that? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve that consent. Motion by Mr. Best,
Second.
second by Dan Smith. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Whoever's here for Universal Piping Industries, step up and Charlie will have you sign the appropriate document. Thank you, sir.
That's what it's called going through them.
You know what I forgot on the postponement is oh no, I got it, single property. All right, so who did I miss that we gotta go back up to?
The Beckett, I think.
Is it Beckett property?
That's the one you said.
And they're still outside.
Beckett and then Stone Lane.
Okay. So we'll give it
Go on to old business.
yeah, let's move on to old business and then we'll come back to those 2 consent items. So under old business, PDP 2021-44 Penn Alley Townhomes, preliminary subdivision plat to subdivide 1.42 acre lot into 3 lots and consolidate additional land into those created lots located at 228 North Mulberry and parcel 166-40-071.000. Oh, okay. I think we've saved so much time, it's a good thing for everybody.
Yeah. I tell you what,
See that?
a lot of people are interested in these rental stuff, but I don't know who gets notice. Yeah, I don't either. It's not like it's Property.
I don't
Well,
know.
who knows?
All right, Matt, you
It's a
got the
mystery.
Penn Alley Townhome.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So the application before you here is actually, I guess, sort of a two-part application. The applicant is requesting a preliminary subdivision plat to take a 1.4 acre lot and split it into 3 lots. And then the second part of the application is a preliminary development plan that would allow the applicant to build a 5-unit townhome on that, one of the lots that they're proposing to subdivide. That's the 1.4 acres originally. So the project site sort of spans two lots. The first is at 228 North Mulberry. There's an existing house on that lot. And then the second, I've identified here on the screen by parcel number. But for those familiar with the area, it's a lot that fronts on both Offit Alley and Penn Alley, and it's sort of behind the homes that run along Bourbon Street. The current zoning on the properties in question are B3, it's our central business district, and R2, it's a medium-density residential zoning district. And the surrounding properties are zoned B3, R2, and then there's some properties that are also zoned B2, which is our highway commercial zoning district. So the total acreage between the 2 lots in question is about 2.1 acres. I noticed on the staff report I had included the wrong total acreage, but the lots that I listed there on the first sheet, sort of dividing up how they're intending to split the lots, that's all accurate. I just put the wrong total acreage. Access for the project site will be from North Mulberry, Offit Alley, and Penn Alley, and the development plan, not the subdivision plat, does have one variance associated with it. So on the screen you can see this is the zoning map showing the current zoning of all the properties in question, highlighted in blue, and you can see the zoning of the surrounding properties that are not highlighted in blue. So you can see the area between Offit Alley and Penn Alley. There is identified, and then the property off Mulberry Street. So the properties to the south are generally zoned commercial, just varying types, and the properties to the north are zoned residential. That, I guess, just as a note, that's not necessarily indicative of the current uses on many of those sites. Many of those sites do have residential uses currently. This is an aerial view of the site, just so you can be a little bit more familiar with the area we're talking about. So just like I go through in the staff report, first we'll talk about the preliminary subdivision plat. And you can see it here on the screen. So the first thing that the application is seeking approval of is to subdivide that property between Penn Alley and Offit Alley into 3 lots. There's also, you'll notice, transfer and consolidation that's proposed as part of that. And you can maybe see it even a little bit better here on this, where if you look on the Penn Alley side of the lot, the applicant's, my understanding is currently either in negotiations or has finished negotiations to acquire the back sides of those lots. So those would be consolidated with the project site, and then the project site would be split into 3 lots as labeled on the preliminary plat. The plat complies with all of our requirements. The applicant is showing that sort of dark gray area on the site would all be access and utility easements, so the 3 lots could be served, by the various utilities, water, sewer, electric, and then, you could access all 3 sites by, pedestrians or vehicles. The access would be provided in that easement as well. Excuse me. I note in the staff report that I think the version of the plat that gets recorded should probably also include the lot over at 228 Penn Alley or 228 North Mulberry, just because they are proposing to create an access and utility easement across the north side of that lot, and I think it might be easier to just accomplish all of these things on a single plat rather than record 2 different plats. But the applicant is obviously free to submit 2 different plats. it wouldn't violate the regulations either way. But as I mentioned, the preliminary plat does comply with all of our regulations. I don't really have any issues with it at all. On the screen now is the preliminary development plan. So the preliminary development plan, as I mentioned before, would be for the 5-unit townhome that they're showing on that lot that I guess is proposed to abut against Offit Alley. The lot is large enough for a 5-unit townhome. It falls within the density requirements. The applicant has indicated that each of those townhomes would be a 2-story. Access to the townhomes would come via the access drive that they're proposing across the north of, the property at 228 North Mulberry, and then the access easement across the north side of that lot. So traffic could come from North Mulberry, it could come from Offit Alley. I note in the staff report, I looked at the ITE trip generation manual. It looks like about 2.6 trips, peak hour trips would be generated. So it's well below the 100 peak hour trips where we would require a traffic impact study. They do show sidewalk access along the private driveway, even extending onto the lot between the alleys. That would provide pedestrian access. As far as landscaping, we do require a 10-foot wide landscaping buffer between the project site and any properties that are either zoned for or used as single-family residential. So the buffer area should have 1 tree spaced every 40 feet of linear boundary, plus a 6-foot tall planting, hedge, fence, wall, or earth mound. And the applicant has complied with that requirement. I do note in the staff report, although this is sort of an issue that we would typically resolve later in the process, it is possible that along the north side of the property, there may be a little bit of a conflict between the tree placement and the water line, but I think there's sufficient space there that we can make sure that those are spaced adequately, and that can be worked out at the final development plan stage. As far as the vehicular use area landscaping, the plan meets our requirements for that, as well as our minimum canopy requirements. I do recommend approval of both applications. Actually, before I move on, I just want to note here on the landscaping plan, the preliminary landscaping plan. I believe the buffers sort of on the north and the south side do show that the applicant is meeting our requirements, but I wanted to just point out the plan does show, I believe it's a hedge, although that could be replaced by a fence or something else that meets our ordinance's requirements. I had a question from a neighbor about sort of what that screening would look like, so I just wanted to make a note of that. I recommend approval of the preliminary subdivision plat. As I mentioned, it complies with all of our regulations. I recommend approval with the 7 conditions that are listed in the staff report. The first 5 conditions, actually, all of the conditions are standard, complying with local regulations, complying with, requirements of GMWSS, things of that nature. Condition 5 is related to our sunset clause, so, if you all approve this application, the applicant has a 2-year window to record the final subdivision plat that creates these lots. As far as the preliminary development plan, I recommend approval of that as well. There is a variance that's required. Our regs call for the size townhome units that they're proposing to have 2.5 bedroom or 2.5 parking spaces for each unit. They're showing 2 parking spaces for each unit. I think it's a reasonable reduction to go from 13 parking spaces to the 10 that they're showing. I do note, however, that between the Offit and Penn Alley, there's no parking allowed on either of those alleys due to the narrowness, and we don't allow on-street parking on the private drives as well. So, if, for some reason somebody had 2 cars parked in their driveway and they had guests coming, they would have to find a different street to park on perhaps North Mulberry and walk over. So I do recommend approval with the variance, with the 9 conditions that are listed in the staff report. The only one that's, maybe a little bit unique to this application is the 9th one, and that just sort of reminds the applicant that, we don't allow parking on those alleys, and we don't allow parking on private drives.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt?
So Matt, the private access drive on the north side,
Mhm.
it just stubs out. That couldn't be extended a little further, put, looks like maybe 2 or 3 parking spots in there.
I mean,
Northeast corner.
it could in theory. My assumption, and I might be incorrect, is that the applicant intends to extend that private driveway all the way through to Penn Alley, and ultimately have additional units of some kind on those other lots.
All right. And they're going to make improvements to Offit Alley that crosses their property. Is that
Yes,
what
the
that
plan
talks
shows
about?
that they would at least pave the portion in front of their
portion
lot.
of- Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Matt? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Would the applicant come up and speak?
We have a sworn.
Oh, yes, if you're going to speak tonight, please rise and raise your right hand, and Charlie Perkins, our attorney, will swear you in. Thank you, Mr. Perkins.
You all swear affirm the statements you're making tonight to be the truth, to the best of your information and belief.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Go ahead and state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Blaine. I'm with Palmer Engineering. I'm filling in for the project manager, Worth Ellis. He had a rotator cuff surgery yesterday, so I'll do the best of my ability to represent the project and answer any questions you all may have.
Do you have any questions?
And what Mr. Summers said about the drive, or about your question about the access is, my understanding that is correct, that the
Eventually.
subdivision will be eventually done on the other 2 parcels, and the alley will be connected through all the way with private access drive.
All right. Tough job today.
You never know, especially when it's not your project. So I appreciate y'all taking it easy on me.
Any other questions by anybody here that wants to hear? Come on up, ma'am, and state your name for the record. You take your time, we're okay, we'll wait for you.
Well, I've been very much involved in Georgetown, if yo folks know. And
Oh, state your name for the record, ma'am.
Elizabeth Disney, okay?
And your
I
address?
was Elizabeth McMillan. Those that knew my father knew that houses on Rucker, Avondale, Warrendale. So I'm used to building.
Thank you.
And I've helped him build my house back years ago. I've been there 67 years. So I know pretty well about what East Jefferson is. It's a nice little street. But now they have taken the big houses since Todd has come, and now they're busted up into apartment houses. The one on the corner, I understand, is owned by Philip Johnson, and I don't know how many cars come in there and park by his house at nighttime. The next one to me is owned by Philip Johnson, but it's just a single house. My uncle built the next one. My people have built Georgetown. So I know Rucker, Avondale, all those places. So it's now, was an 8-room house, it's now a 3-apartment house. So I'm worried about the traffic. I'm not against progress, but I am against overdoing it on traffic. So I wanted to know if it's coming off Mulberry, and I know at nighttime you go down there, just go tonight, you'll see car after car parked down there, bumper to bumper, just like North Hamilton Street. So I don't want to overdo it on the traffic. I'm not against progress, but I don't want to have to be done with too much traffic. And down on North Hamilton, there's a beauty shop, and that is also a big apartment house. If you go there, you see cars parked, you know. So on the other side of the street, there's no houses built because they couldn't do the septic thing, you know. And I'm grandfathered in because years ago, you didn't have all the codes that you do now. So there's a lot of, there's things you need to know about the street down there on Washington Street. I worked for the newspaper and I remembered the article, and every once in a while, like years ago, people used to get the water there. And they have never been able, as I know of, to control it. Every once in a while, you go down the street, you'll see the street flooded. Well, that's the reason they have to let the water out. But I just don't want, I'm not against it, but I don't want a whole bunch of traffic coming down the street when we got enough going on now. Thank you.
Thank you, dear. Anybody else want to speak? Come on up. State your name and address, please.
I'm James King, on Alford Alley at 712. I just wondered about the water line, and, you know, I'm right close to them. And, you know, I was hearing them talking about, you know, the fences and stuff like that. But we was wondering about the water lines, and there's gonna be a lot of traffic on that road, as crazy as it is now. But, that's the only thing I'm worried about.
Thank you, Mr. King. We'll have the applicant answer a couple of those questions. Anybody else want to speak, either in favor or against? Come on up. And again, state your name and address.
Martha Smith, 355 East Main. I have questions about the two things up for this one proposal, and one's the division. But because there are other properties adjacent, most of my questions might not relate specifically to these 5 townhomes, but it's about precedent setting. Again, there are issues with traffic and parking that are a concern. And Georgetown has quite a few places where there are, on the older houses, large center perimeters, as this property is, that indicate that people, what happens in this might roll on down to the next projects that could be coming along on infill. So I just put that in perspective for you, why I'm speaking on this. I think if you have, by law, 13 parking places required, and 10 seems like a reasonable reduction, it isn't a reasonable reduction if every single property drops it by about a third on your parking spaces. That to me is not a reasonable reduction because of that. I think I heard you say 4 or 5 townhouses could be here. If there were 4 townhomes, then 10 parking spaces might work. But I don't think that we're going to assume that if they can't park on the drive, as it says in the plat, that these cars are going to be nowhere. They're going to be somewhere. So I have the same concerns about parking and traffic. And then I also have another overview thing, and it may not seem germane to this, and I apologize if it's not. But I've lived a lot of places, and the more impervious surface that you put on interior spots like this, it means that runoff goes somewhere. I know this isn't in a floodplain, but there are downhills from this because it still rolls on down to the water and to the creeks and to Royal Spring area. And so again, any precedents that you set up here, you know, do matter. And we are seeing it on East Main tremendously. And in these huge rains, these torrential rains that we get, there are no storm sewers on East Main. I really didn't even bother to go and look on Washington. I think they're probably there. But I don't know what the runoff really is here because this particular property is not in a flood zone, and I can read that. But I do think that these are about planning for the future, and you all are planning. So that's why I bring my questions up, and those are my primary concerns. Some of the others make sense to me too, but I think you all will probably address those with other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Anybody else want to come up and speak? So I guess we'll bring the applicant back up, hopefully. Oh, Charlie has to speak.
Just in the nick of time.
Charlie, you weren't here earlier, you need to sign in there. and get-
Okay.
And swear.
And he
Oh, I
better
done,
need
I
to
done
swear in.
been, yeah, I done been sworn in and sworn at.
As long as it's sworn in.
Were you sworn in, Charlie?
Yes,
Yeah,
I
he
was.
was, but he didn't sign
Oh,
it.
so just make sure you sign it.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, because they'd already taken the paper away when I
Oh.
came in. I was,
Charlie put your
I
name
was
on it.
tardy.
Charlie had
Sorry.
his name to it. Go ahead.
But,
Mr. Hoffman.
I'm Charlie Hoffman, and I own the property at 406 Bourbon Street. And the lots from Penn Street, I guess would be the addresses of 400, 402, 404, and 406, which is the brick house next to the police department. And then on the lot across from the police department where the Kidwell property was, and my son owns the property next to his Graves Lumber Company. So we have invested over in that area. And I have some of the same concerns, I guess, that we have moved since that time. We have moved to Main Street, but now we're in the process of redoing that house at 406 Bourbon Street. And some of the concerns that I have, and my background is that I've held several offices, county and state. I'm a real estate broker, auctioneer, and a 43-year Kroger employee retiree. We lived at 406 Bourbon Street for 30 years, which I think makes us Barbara and Bias Pilford are the last, only two that lived there, are still there from the time that we moved there. And I'm glad to see the concept of infill being adopted, because I think that's, go out and start talking, making conversation out in the community. Urban sprawl comes up quickly here in Georgetown. I think the infill approach is what's needed, but I think that the legitimate concerns that the people have, if you all can do this without being too obtrusive or not obtrusive, but anyhow, the less change that you can make, just like in Mr. King's property. He lives right there, and we talked earlier, and I told him, I said, well, if you want an address, you need to come up there and tell them, because I can tell you that it will impact your property, and you can discuss plantings or setbacks, or you can discuss fences or things like that. Because Offit Alley, it's not really that heavily traveled. There's not very many people go up through there. It's a very nice piece of property, and it backs up, I guess, behind all the properties there that face on Bourbon Street. And I was involved in several of the comprehensive plan, voted on the adoption of several of those during my political career, and I just want the commission to take those things. There's a lot of history in the area. The house that I live in at 406 Bourbon Street was built by Mr. John Miller, who was one of the most successful minority businessmen I know in Scott County history, maybe in the history of Kentucky. And his name was listed in the Dun and Bradstreet's, whatever. Anyhow, it was something to be able to do that. And We've raised our children on Bourbon Street. Whatever, listen, like I said, I like the idea of infill instead of expansion of our annexation, I guess, of farmland or disappearance of agriculture or green space or whatever. And I'm glad to see that you all are looking at it, but it also, you know, the devil's in the details. It's just like with anything. It is a good concept. The lady from Palmer probably has some other things to add to that. But when we moved over there in '89, there were houses all around us. Only house left. We're right there next to the Georgetown Police Department. And and there's a lot of other potential for making that area vibrant again. But of course, you know, once you head down a road, you can't. It's not that easy to change direction. So I think once people, if y'all could set their mind at ease that their lifestyle or their concerns will be accommodated, that'll go a long way to making. We call it good fences make good neighbors. That's yeah. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
Thank y'all. Oh yeah, and I'm running for Scott County Judge Executive.
Does the applicant want to come and answer? Oh, Mr. Lusby. You're not making a political announcement, are you?
No, I'll leave that. No, wouldn't be appropriate. I'm David Lusby. I live at 121 Locklamon Drive, and I understand some of the concerns. Ms. Disney brought up an excellent point. There's some rather large homes in the area that have been occupied now as multi-family dwellings that were once single-family dwellings. We're purchasing one of those actual homes that was a multi-family dwelling. And the good news is, is that the one? We're gonna take it down, and so it didn't have a driveway. So those folks, you know, however many families were living in there, I know at least 2, maybe 3. So if you do your multiplication on that, you know, 6 or 8 cars potentially for this specific house. We're pulling all of that off the street. Okay, so that's going to be an improvement that I don't think has been mentioned or discussed. That to me is a significant bonus. This project is going to be phased in. This is simply the first phase. Parking, we understand, it's critical. It's very important. And it's something that at later phases we certainly would like to pick up. The other thing I want to pick up or discuss, Charlie, and you can appreciate this, I took the worst house on Bourbon Street, the one that Mr. Hodge lived in there on the corner. You know which one I'm talking about? I spent a fortune on it.
I know you did.
And I put a chariot in it. I put the gathering place in it. And I'm hardly charging them anything compared to what rent in the area ought to be. Because I want to do it. I want to help them. I bought the house on Penn Alley, 212 Penn Alley. I lose track of the address. My daughter helped me with that one. We paid $50,000 for the house. Somehow, she spent $125,000 extra dollars fixing it. But it's adorable. It's a dollhouse. And we rebuilt it from inside out. And stop by and take a look at it. It couldn't be cuter. This piece of property went up for sale. It was an online auction. And I was interested. I saw it. I own property in the area. And I love Georgetown. That's, you know, what I want to do. I enjoy it. So I'm in a bidding contest with folks from outside the community to buy this little piece of property. And fortunately, I think, I ended up with it. And I outbid the out-of-town folks. So I'm bringing Matt Welch in. Matt Welch has got a pretty decent reputation. He built a pretty nice home, a real nice home. So he and I are together are going to try to build some nice, affordable, but very nice, well-landscaped townhomes. We went a step above and beyond. We had to acquire some of the backyards from a few property owners. And they were willing to work with us. One of them in particular, Ms. Wilson, she wanted a new privacy fence. She wanted patio, little steps to go up to her swimming pool. She wanted some more land. We said, okay, we'll do all that. We're gonna pay you more than the appraised value. We're gonna give you your fence, and we're gonna do landscape. We're gonna do whatever you want. And we've agreed to those things. We want to be the best neighbors we can be. And I promise you, at the end of the day, it'll be nice. If somebody has a problem with it, you let Matt know, or you let me know, we'll do what we can to take care of it. I'm not that familiar with the water lines and the sewer lines. We obviously are gonna be taking care of stormwater. There is an area specifically designed to take care of that, and we'll do what we need. But at the end of the day, I promise you, it's gonna be a nice improvement. It's infield, just like what you're saying. This is exactly what, you know, this body and others have asked for us to do, and that's what we're doing. So I'll be glad to answer any other questions, but I just wanted to.
I think you've covered it, because I've got traffic, parking, and water runoff were the main concerns. I think you've covered it.
Yeah, I was just gonna reiterate, I guess, on the plat, we have set aside a detention easement. So that is something that we will be providing for, and obviously working with Ben, once we get to the final development plan stage, to make sure, that not just this part of it, but that the whole development, is adequately taken care of, both for water quantity and water quality concerns.
Thank you. And I know, folks, a lot of you may not have ever come to these meetings before, but generally speaking, when new construction comes, there's usually an improvement to water flow, water flowage, sewage, etc. And that is in the applicant's we recommend, the staff recommends. So in the recommendations, it is to not negatively affect the water flow, but at least not affect it at all, or in most cases improve it. So that's usually the general consensus of the staff, and our job as commissioners is to improve the conditions. The worst thing we ever want to do is have somebody come in, build something, and then that's going to cause your yards to flood. We don't want that. We don't allow that, really. I mean, and that's Ben Krebs' job to make sure that doesn't happen.
I was gonna say, there's one thing, I work in a lot of different communities, and
Come on up to the microphone, because we
a lot of different communities, and Ben Krebs is one of the best at this, and he's gonna make sure and take care of you all. I promise you that. I've worked with Ben since I started my career.
Don't swell his head too much.
We've got pretty strong regulations.
So, any other questions, comments, folks? Come on up to the microphone and state your name, and
I just had one.
well, you still gotta come up and state your name and give us your address.
Ben Smith, 355 East Main. My question was, all the best plans of mice and men, if there was water runoff issues, what do you guys do as, and ladies, for a remedy? So I understand that you're believing this will work. We've had some unforeseen water on Main Street. And my question basically is, if it goes south more than you think, or there is water in yards or backup and runoff, after it's been approved, what's the remedy for that?
I'll let Ben Krebs come and speak to that, if you don't mind, Mr. Krebs.
Okay.
Come on, I know you gotta come up to the microphone, sir.
I don't know what the remedy is without going into detail. What they are proposing, they will capture everything on that lot, either in pipes and drains, and they're gonna store it in a big basin and slowly discharge it into the storm sewer that's in the street there. So, if you wanted to talk what's going on Main Street, different things, that's probably a long conversation, but I don't know how to answer it. Okay.
I just wanted to know if a new project, and I realize this isn't large, but a new project didn't work exactly how it had been hoped to work, it certainly wouldn't be the first time. And my concern would be, if we have an what's the remedy from the commission or the city? How do you deal with it if and when it happens? I think that's good information to know beyond this project too.
Yes, no, if there's faulty design or any time, I mean, it is studied, it's looked at. Sometimes attorneys get involved. It's generally has to be remediated. I mean, they've got to meet a certain standard in design and function. So
That's something,
So
that's
that
something
would
to
be
look at.
something you guys would enforce if in fact, even though you don't anticipate it, if it happened, there would be a remedy at your level to make sure that gets fixed.
I think so.
That's not very confident. The reason for the question is, I mean, people can always go hire their favorite attorney and then start costly litigation. But if it's approved by the planning commission and support of your department, I would hope there's a remedy that the taxpayers don't have to do it on their own, rather than, you know, that there would be some enforcement on the city level for that doing. So that's what I'm.
What I'll do is I'll actually defer to our attorney, because that's what we pay him for. Charlie, what's the answer?
Well, the answer is, we have actually very good regulations, and everything they design has got to meet the regulations. If they don't meet the regulations, then they've got to make corrections. They will not get occupancy permits and so on. The ultimate shortcoming of our enforcement system is, if they meet every regulation, then we're pretty much done, because they've got to, I'm sure there's some performance standards, but by and large, they've got to meet them. If they do, then they get approved and they finish out the build out. We have certainly had some developers, not too many, I mean, quite frankly, we've been quite successful, but we have had some where water problems were created, and other remediation had to be done. That hasn't happened much. Of course, I've only been around 40-something years, so something might have happened I don't know about, but our review and our permitting and all that process is really quite good. And so our record is pretty daggone good.
Great.
Thank you.
But
Thank you all.
as far as problems on East Main, this is not gonna solve problems on East Main. It may help a little bit, but it's not gonna.
Thanks, Ben.
Understand. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
I don't think that they've ever controlled that on Washington Street, down there where the big sign says tacos. I know I go Washington Street a whole lot. And when it gets too full, they have to let it out on the street. That's one that's never been controlled as I know of. And as I said, Georgetown News, some time ago did an article that back years ago, that's where people went and got their water.
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Cornish.
You guys aren't gonna believe,
State your name, sir.
Roy Cornett, Main Street. You guys aren't gonna believe this, I'm gonna support the staff a little bit. All these problems we're talking about are in the older sections of town that were developed before we've got all the rules and regulations we've got today. And I'm just sitting here trying to think of any flooding problems downstream of any newer developments. Now, I can't think of any of them. Main Street, sorry, but long time ago. There's any new stuff, I'm not thinking of it. I'm a real estate operator, I'm an old town, so just when the system seems to be working, I guess my point.
Thank you, Mr. Cornett. Come on up. State your name again.
Martha Smith. You know, it is true, and I totally agree that you're thinking that our concerns are, somebody said we can't deal with Main Street right now. Main Street doesn't really have big problems, and one of the great things is people come in to see Main Street and how attractive it is, and it is significant to be able to take care of some of these places because I think it enhances the whole community. But the runoff, because of no storm sewers, let me just go into this a moment, the no storm sewers at all on Main Street, with big downhill and all of the development from the time 75 got developed and all of that development on that end has made a difference. And so that's to the point why I don't think it's a problem that you're in a no flood zone, but I'm talking from experience of living in a lot of places that wonderfully we're looking at infill now, but we've lived in old cities where they're old enough that the sewer systems are collapsing or the infrastructure's falling apart, and they didn't plan along the ways when development was just yes, yes, yes. And so impervious surface regulations vary tremendously. And we are at the age at this community where we don't want to kill out what made this a beautiful, wonderful, historic place to live. Even the building we're in has mixed-use adaptation. And so I'm hugely in favor of infill, hugely in favor of having development downtown, which I think is terrific. And I don't see that the things that I've said were about a problem. It's about preventing problems. And I hope that you all can all understand that I'm glad you had a lot of consent agendas get through so that we actually could take on these considerations, because wisely, you're developing and you did bid out somebody else who might not even want to listen to any of this. But I think this is a great forum to have an opportunity to say what makes the community great and what will make it even better. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Any questions, concerns, thoughts by the commission? I will entertain a motion.
Sure, wow. Mr. Lusby? Yes, I do have concern about just those 3 parking spots.
Yeah.
Ms. Smith was right, they can make a problem. The next phase, is there gonna be parking close enough where we can
Oh, it'll be,
pick it up?
it'll be close enough, but I don't really know exactly how that's laid out.
I mean, that's something that we still have a lot of
Yeah,
working
come up
to
to the microphone, sorry.
This is something we still have a lot of working through to do. We've really only looked at this first phase in depth. And so that's something that we can definitely take into consideration, trying to at least provide without having additional variances, if we can look at that in future phases.
We've got some ideas, because we own some other property that backs up to this as well. And Mr. Fournette was right. I mean, we're going into an area that really didn't have any stormwater mitigating factors at all. And we're going to be putting the only ones in the general area. Ms. Smith, Mr. Smith, I believe they're right too. We've got significant stormwater issues in Georgetown. We've got $82 million worth of stormwater improvements that are the city's responsibility. And we have to maintain those. You know, things have to be replaced, things have to be fixed. And it's a big deal. We don't really truly have a funding mechanism right now other than pulling money from the general fund. So that's a big deal, and it's something that we are absolutely looking at from a community standpoint. Does that help?
It does. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Both of you.
Comments, thoughts? Come on up here, Mr. Hoffman. You gotta come back up to microphone.
Charlie Hoffman.
I was just wondering, if Mr. King's concerns, how the development would, affect his property. Now, my mother lives on the corner of Jefferson and Hamilton. She lives in the brick house there on the corner. And then 2 doors down, my aunt lives on Jefferson. Her yard backs up to Jefferson. My half-brother lives on the corner. And so how much more traffic is gonna come down that way? And will this road continue down to Penn Avenue?
Yes.
It will, okay. Okay. Has there been any studies as far as traffic increase, or is there any problems?
I'll answer that, Joe. It doesn't require a traffic study, correct?
Well, okay, all right, okay,
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
all right.
I'll address this question really quickly. As Mr. Summers pointed out, you know, we're looking at peak hour, I think 3-ish trips during the peak hour. So we're not talking, I think, about, it's something that's going to make a sizable difference in the area for the traffic for this particular homes.
Thank you. Questions, comments, thoughts, anything else?
I just think like Mr. Rhodes said, you could have helped it with somebody else that came in and just did it.
Anything else?
I agree, it'd be the only water abatement system at all, you know, being that it is an older area, there's nothing there existing. If to the southeastern side of the property, I believe, Miss, most of your concerns would be south of the project area, is that correct? So hopefully, that abates some of that. What is this drive here, 25 feet wide, that would eventually continue on through Penn, is that correct? 25 feet wide. I don't know if y'all intend on any parking on the street after it finishes through. That's a possibility. Something that kind of came to mind, like how they've done Water Street, maybe at some point it becomes one way, and then you're able to park on the side, on the curb, and you won't have to worry about traffic going both ways, or, not to hold you to anything,
No,
spitballing.
all good ideas. We
Take
do
note.
own some additional property that we could probably
And shuffle
add
over.
some additional parking spaces.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? With that being said, I'll entertain a motion for this application.
I'll make a motion that we approve, CDP 2021-44, staff recommendation.
I got a motion by Mr. Garrett, second by Mr. Shirley. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. The applicant can come up here and sign with Mr. Perkins. Thank you, I appreciate it.
And that would tell you the recommendation.
Let's, I guess, circle back around. We had two consent eligible items. Are they both being heard? Beckett was one of them, and Stone Lane was the other. Matt, did we resolve all questions with Stone Lane, or does this one need to be heard?
I think they want to hear that.
Is somebody here for Stone, here to hear Stone Lane? Did you want to hear it? Did she answer all your questions? Or did Matt answer all your questions?
I went out there, I can't answer all the questions.
Oh, okay. All right, so we'll hear them both. All right, so next on the agenda. Next on the agenda is the Beckett property.
Thank y'all for your service.
So go ahead, Miss Elise, if this is your Beckett property.
Stone Lane is Matt's and Beckett is mine.
Beckett's yours.
Yes, I wouldn't be standing up here if it wasn't
You're next.
mine.
That's what I said, Beckett property. So we're gonna hear the FSP 2022-07 Beckett property, final subdivision plat to subdivide a 15.53 acre parent tract into 3 tracts and to transfer 0.31 acres to adjoining property located at 4642 Muddy Ford Road.
I'll give everybody a second to kind of clear. I'm gonna give everybody a second to clear out and then I'll get started. All right, I'll just speak up. So this is, as you said, this is a final subdivision plat to subdivide a 15.53 acre parent tract into 3 approximately 5 acre tracts and transfer the remaining 0.31 acres to an adjoining property owner off of Muddy Ford Road. The property is zoned A1 agricultural and is surrounded by agriculturally zoned properties, and access for the sites would be off of Muddy Ford Road. This is just an aerial shot of the zoning and the surrounding properties. This is the subdivision plat, or the subdivision plan as proposed by the applicant. The 3 tracts are kind of stacked on top of each other, with the southernmost tract, tract number 9, using an existing entrance. Tracts 7 and 8 would share an entrance that kind of lies in the middle of that property line, and to my understanding from surrounding property owners, it is kind of at a peak of a hill, and then they kind of disperse from there. It satisfies all of our requirements for building setbacks and build lines and everything, and meets the lot size requirements. They would need, kind of going back to the driveways, they would need KYTC approval, as Muddy Ford Road is Kentucky state managed road, and we would need to have a document proving that the application that they have proposed is approved by the transportation cabinet. The southern property has around where the subdivision of the 0.31 acres is going to be pulled from. You can kind of see it on I'm trying to think of how I'm going to reference this. You can kind of see it on the property there. It's that black arrow portion that kind of cuts into Track 9 that will be transferred to the Colemans, which is south of them. So everything would be about the same 5-acre size. Staff does recommend approval of the final subdivision plat subject to the 5 conditions that are listed above. The first 4 of which are those typical of any subdivision plat in the rural areas, and then the 5th one is that the entrance permit be submitted to our office prior to recording the final plat. So, yes, that's all I have for everybody.
Any questions for Ms. Elise? Thank you.
So track 7, it's got an existing entrance up there, so will it?
It does not access that one. It's north of the property line, so it's not designated
Okay,
for
so
that
it
one.
doesn't access that.
Yeah, the area marked with the red arrow on the board is the new proposed ones, and then the blue ones are just existing surrounding ones on the same side of the road.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Anyone in the audience want to speak with regards to this property? Come on up. Have you been sworn in?
Yes.
Okay, good. So of course, state your name and address for the record.
Julie House, 4649 Muddy Ford. Where that red arrow is, that's the driveway to my property, his property, and Tom Cutney's property. It's on a blind hill. Where they want to put that driveway on their side of Muddy Ford, somebody's going to get killed if a driveway is put there. It's a blind hill. If they were to try to turn right out of their driveway to go down Muddy Ford towards 62, they can't see. His mailbox, their mailbox at the top of the driveway regularly, I'm talking at least once every 3 months, is taken out. 2 cars meet going opposite directions at the top of that hill, and they're proposing to put another driveway there. It's crazy. Plus, I have questions about, are there going to be any deed restrictions with this property? I understand that it's county property. You get 5-acre tract, you should be able to do whatever you want with your property. I've lived out there for 30 years, never had any problems. They've developed other parts of the Beckett property. We never complained, never said anything. Well, now we've got dogs running loose constantly. I used to be able to sit out on my porch and not hear gunfire. It's continual, all the time. You can't sit out there without hearing gunshot. And my main concern is, are they just developing this, intending on keeping it? Are they gonna sell it? If they do sell it, right now there's trailers there. My understanding is you have to build 50 feet off of property line in the county. With these narrow tracks, there's no way that they're ever gonna be able to build a house there. So is it always gonna be trailers up there, or, that's my question. Are they gonna come back and say, will you give me a variance for this 50-foot thing? It's just a lot of unknowns, and we would like those questions answered, basically. But the main concern is the safety of the driveway.
Excuse me, your name again, please?
Julie House,
House?
H-O-U-S-H.
Oh, gosh, very good, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak? Sir, come on up and state your name and address.
My name is Barry McNeese, 4655 Muddy Ford Road. I think unfortunately, we've only recently become aware of the detail of this proposal. I think that one being that we didn't receive the mail notice, and I don't know if that's because our mailbox is out again, but just for the record, we did not receive the notice. But I think one of our concerns is what exactly is the intent of this? Better understanding, just as a part of the community, we've lived there for 20 years. It's only been within recent years that we've had the issues with traffic problems. I think what has happened, while we understand that no single project that is generating below a certain threshold is going to require a traffic study, common sense indicates that if you let enough of these go in that don't have a study done, that you end up at a point where there is an issue. And I think we're past that point. We would ask that while we understand Kentucky governs this road, 922, we would ask that the folks who represent us locally and our interests, if it's not required by the state, that it be required or at least asked to be considered for our community, given the very real world concerns that we have a history of there. I think, you know, it's just been within I guess it was a week ago today that they cut down all the trees along the roadway there, so it's now all bare. The notice for this meeting that was attached to a tree has been laying in the grass for the last week. Fortunately, we were able to jot down the address and contact the Planning Commission office to at least become somewhat aware of what's going on. I think our biggest issue is we feel a little surprised that this is kind of all of a sudden emerged. We don't feel that we've had sufficient notice. Maybe there has been that's met regulation, but we feel a little bit taken off guard. And we would ask either for an opportunity to speak with those who are actually developing the site to understand the intent, or to speak to someone who has a real-world understanding of the implications of adding another driveway within feet of a spot that is continually an issue of a demonstrable traffic problem. And so we would just ask for further discussion on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak either in favor or against this one? Line up. State your name and address.
Rita Jones, 402 Old Oxford Road, Georgetown. I'm the realtor for Mr. Beckett with this property, and he's quite ill and elderly and not able to attend. Just to address a few of the concerns, the Department of Transportation approved that entrance, and that's why the trees were cut, so that you could see both ways. And we had asked to have that a little further north, but they insisted it be directly across from your entrance. That's where the only place they would approve it. And so I assume they're saying if your entrance is safe, this entrance is the same, because it's directly across from yours. As far as traffic, there's already two double wide and two single wides on the property. So they're already inhabited. There won't be any additional. Our hope is that those two older single wides will be replaced with much nicer housing and won't be rental units any longer, and therefore maybe will improve your neighborhood.
So you'll have to come back to the microphone because we can't have a back and forth conversation.
Further down the road, when there is housing, as you say, how are they gonna fit a house if you have to be 50 feet off of each side of the property line?
Mr. Day is the surveyor, and it's like any other plat. It is jotted where the 50 foot is off, and there is room.
So,
Mr. Day, do you want to come up here and speak or maybe answer her question? State, of course, your name and address.
Joel Day, East Main Street. With a little geometry, I mean, we made the existing homes fit okay, and meet the 250-foot minimum width and 50-foot setbacks. The northernmost single wide, they wouldn't be able to replace that with a stick-built home of any size without a variance from the Board of Adjustment. But there is a sizable buildable area elsewhere on the lot, on the other side of the pond. So there's plenty of buildable area there. Plenty of buildable area for a home on number 8, the center lot, and on the lot where Mr. Beckett lives. Well, of course, there's plenty. But yeah, I'll go ahead and address the location also. I don't know if this lady knew where the location was, where they took the trees down, not where the sign was. But it should be. But anyway, the highway department, it's all on them, and they like them straight across. They like them where other entrances are. They I don't know anything about traffic engineering, but if there's an entrance across the road, then they try to put the new entrance opposite it.
It's a blind hill. I mean, we
Yeah.
can see, on our side of the road, we can see both directions. But on their side of the road, if they're gonna try to turn right to come on Muddy Ford going towards 62, it's a blind hill. They're not gonna be able to see.
They have a, is that a 35-mile road or 55? I don't remember, but
35, yeah.
it's,
Yeah. Speed limit,
Right,
I think, is
yeah,
35
yeah.
out there, but I think everybody does 55.
And a lot of times with that,
now they have a formula, and it's so many seconds at the speed limit. You have to be able to see so many seconds up the road or down the road.
right,
From, Ben might remember some of this stuff. The sight line is what, 15 feet from off the road, and I don't know, 4 and 4.5 seconds at speed limit, I forget, but it's about 400, at 55, it's like 484 feet, I think, at 35 mile an hour, it's about 300 feet.
I don't know. All I know is it's
But-
gonna be a major safety issue.
That's
not
right
only
numbers,
for
isn't it?
us,
Yeah.
but other people traveling Muddy Ford.
As to why this gentleman didn't get his letter, I sent those out. But his address was 46 something. If you're outside that 1,000-foot barrier, radius, I mean, you could have been just outside it. But that information.
It's the same property that I live.
I don't know. But that information is provided to us by the county GIS people. So, you know, I don't check it, but I rely on them for that. They give us a list of, they give us a map that shows the 1,000-foot radius around the property, and they give us a list of those owners. So you could have just been barely outside. Couldn't say.
Thank you.
But
Sure.
I have another question for you. Sure.
Then you gotta come back up, you can't be hollering out. Please, thank you.
If his intent is to sell this, possibly develop houses, Mr. Beckett owns from the end of this property to 62.
No,
He doesn't own the corner anymore?
all Mr. Beckett owns is what you see, 15.3. That's all he owns. His sister owns that property that you're
Is that
describing.
going to be developed?
No, we don't know. We don't have anything to do with that.
Okay, because that's
Oh,
another concern
right.
too. If we're allowing this development, and I don't even know how many acreage, that is the whole corner of 62, Muddy Ford, and Delplain.
That's Mr. Beckett's sister,
Okay.
and we don't,
And
we're
that's
not
for
involved.
sale right now. Is that going to be developed here?
We don't know, we're only discussing this property.
Right,
But this is
So-
all Mr. Beckett owns. This is the last of his property.
right. Can you find out for me from Mr. Beckett if there is any deed restrictions he's putting on this property?
kind of hard to restrict a deed that already has single lots.
I think I might be able to answer the question, and staff could probably correct me if I'm wrong. You're only allowed one house per 5-acre lot. So right now, as it stands, there's trailers on there. They can't build another house on there as it stands unless they tear the trailer off.
Exactly.
And then if they tear the trailer off, then again, they can only put one house on each of those parcels. So you have
Right.
a total of no more than 3 houses.
Which is
Correct.
what's currently there now.
Correct. So
Right.
right now, unless the trailers are removed, they can't build anything else. Staff, correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
Thank you. Hopefully that answers your question. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Any other questions? Yes, sir, come on up.
I just want to make sure that my questions have not been answered. While I can understand, I mean, evidently, Mr. Beckett's realtor has been kept very busy in that area with the number of subdivisions. And while it's been stated that that is the only site that the Kentucky Department of Transportation would approve, that was without our involvement. I think in the end, as it's not that uncommon that if you're only asking the person who owns a property what's appropriate, they're happy with the first answer they get as long as they know they have access that unleashes the economic development of their property. I would argue that there is sufficient reason to hit the brakes for just a moment and see if there is not a better solution that does not have a record of such a dangerous positioning. And we would be happy to talk with the Kentucky Department of Transportation in tandem with them. But I think to give this a stamp of approval, particularly given just the eccentricities of notice, the sign postage, I mean, it deserves, and I think if Mr. Beck were here today, he might agree that he doesn't want to ramrod something through knowing that there are neighbors with concerns. And I stand as one who has grave concerns.
Thank you, sir. Other comments, thoughts, questions? If not, I'll open up to the commission for questions, thoughts.
I have, I travel Muddy Ford Road on a semi-regular basis. I have a friend lives on out past Anderson Road, so I'm up and down that area, and it is not a good situation at any time. It's kind of like Connector Road that we have that's it's been developed, and the road wasn't designed to accommodate the new development, and Muddy Ford is kind of the same way. I understand Mr. Beckett's desire and right to get rid of his property and move on to something else there and get rid of it. But I understand your concerns, I really do. It's not a good situation. People continue to build out there, and evidently it's a desirable spot because they keep coming down that road. I would, Mr., is it McNeese?
Yes, sir.
You know, get hold of the Department of Transportation in Lexington and ask them, you know, why they chose this area. And I'm willing to recommend that we hold this off for another month, so, because there seemed to be some question about the notices and all, and give everybody a chance to talk with Mr. Beckett, talk with Highway Department, and then some of those other questions may be answered for you. And, you know, unfortunately, just because there have been wrecks there, and there are wrecks on a pretty consistent basis, if that's the only place for another driveway, that's the only place for another driveway. That may be something we just have to, that we as a community have to deal with, but,
Do you want to make a motion?
Well, I just kind of wanted to ask a few questions as well. Let's see here. Under, was this Matt or Elise? Before your recommendations, it says, shared entrance that will need approval from, Kentucky, KYTC, as it's a state highway, okay? So that's essentially a condition of yours, as it should be.
so has that been approved yet by
But
then?
here, and that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
Is, as you see, while it says that, this is the Kentucky DOT approved entrance location, however, it still says see note 1. At the very bottom of note 1, it says preliminary, not for recording or use in transfer. So, my question is as does the application provided information as we're supplied currently stands, does that even satisfy what we want as a board or as staff? Because as such, I'm not led to believe the applicant has provided proof that the transportation cabinet has approved this entrance before the final plat will be recorded. Again, that might be beyond and in the future of our scope, assuming that this is the most contentious issue with this application.
To answer your initial comment on the note, that is for the ownership certification, so it kind of, there's no header that differentiates between the note section and then the ownership certification. So it starts with the I certify that I am the owner of the property. That preliminary noting is because this is a kind of the preliminary before they go and collect signatures portion.
Well, I mean, I guess maybe since, and not to cut you off, Miss, but since Mr. Day has prepared this document, Mr. Day, can you speak to the language that allowed you to say Kentucky Department of Transportation approved? Is such a fact on record, I assume? Does that make sense, Joel?
Yeah,
what I'm
but
asking?
it's, so much is casual between. Go ahead.
They came out and told us where the entrance had to be, the shared entrance for the 2 homes that are already there. And they said there's about 6 trees that need to be cut, and with Mr. Beckett's frail health, he couldn't get that done back during the winter. So we only got that done a couple of weeks ago. I sent that in to the Department of Transportation. They came out and looked and sent me an email that they would approve it. I don't have the form in hand, but it is forthcoming.
Well, I don't know, and Charlie and Mark, et cetera, can probably, help me understand, but I don't know if the information we've been given as it sits that we're allowed to approve it.
I might say we don't mind waiting another month and I'll have that in hand.
That's 2 of us.
If the state's approved it, we just don't have the document in hand, and we don't sign it until we have the document in hand anyway.
Well, and Ms. Jones said they would approve it. Did they say they are going to approve it?
The email said they would approve it, but I just haven't received it back due to timing. But it's okay to wait a month until I have that.
Then do we have a motion to would it be postpone or continue?
Continue.
So I have a motion?
I so move that we continue, FSP 2021-07, till we get some further information.
I've got a motion by Mr. Mifflin.
Second.
A second by Mr. Shirley. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? So we'll continue this next month. Thank you. Hopefully y'all can get some answers. Thank you all. Next on there is the FSP dash 2022-10, the Stone Lane Farm Lot 4, final subdivision plat to subdivide 26.3 acre lot into 2 lots, transferring and consolidating about 6.8 acres to an adjoining lot. Matt.
All right, thank you. The project site is at 222 Stone Lane. As you mentioned, the applicant is looking to take a 26-acre lot They're gonna subdivide it, I guess, to describe it a different way, they're gonna just divide it into 3 lots. 2 of those lots are intended to remain as standalone lots, and then the third will just be consolidated with a lot that was subdivided around this time last year. The zoning on the property is A1. All of the surrounding properties are zoned A1. That's our agricultural zoning district. And access for all the lots is intended off of Stone Lane. There are no variances or waivers requested with this application. This is our zoning map. You can see Stone Lane winding its way across the property, or not the property, through the area.
Could you two take the conversation, please, out into the hallway? I'd appreciate that. Oh, that's fine, thank you.
And then the property in question is that 222 property shown there. It's the large property sort of in the center. It's 26.3 acres. And this is a zoomed-in version of their proposed subdivision plat. It shows the lot being split, as you can see, into 3 parcels. You can see these consolidation marks here in red on the plan on what's labeled as parcel C. That's intended to be consolidated with the previously subdivided tract 7. And then parcels B and A will remain independent lots. Parcel A is proposed to have its own access from Stone Lane. The applicant has already gotten their entrance permit through KYTC and submitted that to staff. And then parcel B will use the previously created access easement that will be on, tract 4B, and it will provide access for tract 4B and tracts 3 and 5 as was previously approved on the last plan. The plat complies with all of our regulations. I recommend approval of it with the 5 conditions that are listed in the staff report. The only one that's not a standard condition is I did notice that just under the surveyor notes, some of the notes were from the last time the overall property in this area was subdivided, so the surveyor just needs to clean up a few details on those notes before the plat gets recorded.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Summers? Thank you.
Yeah.
Would the applicant like to speak?
You don't have my name wrote down, but I did get sworn in.
Okay.
I'm
And the name is?
Tammy Traylor, Traylor. And I'm actually was the real estate agent on this development. And what happened was, it was developed into 10 lots. The person on lot 7, they came back and asked the seller, hey, I'd like to buy lot 4, but I'd like to buy it for my children. And they wanted it split up, and they wanted to take the 6 acres there to extend to the back of their property. And they wanted to split the other parcels into 2, so each child could have roughly 10 acres each. And that's basically why we're here, is because we were asked by a buyer.
So I guess that gives me a question. So you're actually going to take tract C, or tract 4, parcel C, merge it into tract 7, which would give almost 20 acres, and then you're going to turn around later at a later date and redivide that?
No. Well, to my understanding, the way we're going to do it is, they are going to buy the 26 acres. Lot 7 is going to purchase that. And then they're going to give it, their children 10 acres and 10 acres, and then they're going to take the 6 or whatever's left.
Gotcha. Now I understand you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So they're going to give tract parcel B and parcel A, which is roughly one's
Basically,
11 acres, the other is 10.7.
They're basically going to gift their children.
To their gift, and then
Yeah.
they're going to take the tract 4 parcel C, which is at 6.7, and put it into their property.
Right.
That makes sense. I'm sorry. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for this young lady? All right, thank you. Ma'am, do you have a question? Are you one of the neighbors? Or
I am.
Please come on up and state your name and address.
My name is Beth Daniels, and I own Plot 5. So when I got this last week, I was actually kind of confused and upset because in the contract that every person who purchased a piece of property, it was that you cannot subdivide and that each piece of property is allowed to have one physical address home on it. And so they're trying to put 2 houses on 4, which was against the contract that every other person who purchased signed, and something that people on 7 signed. And I really do not want to wake up and stare at their house in the morning because they're my front yard. And
We'll get that answered by the.
and I appreciate what they're trying to do. I have more issues with the way they're trying to cut the plats and trying to take away from the reason we all purchase properties out there. We all purchase properties to be agricultural and not to have a subdivision in my front yard. That's not why I bought it. That's not why any of us bought property out there. And there, I had questions that, I think they answered about the driveway because their driveway shared responsibilities and, some of the easements, again, will have to be realigned, I guess. I've been trying to get an electric pole for a year now, and, they haven't dealt with it because of the easements on 6 and 7, I guess. So I'm still waiting for that too. But I was unhappy to get this, and I haven't had as much time as I'd like to look over it, and until now, or until the beginning of this meeting, I didn't even have a copy of the new plat to see what they were trying to do. And now that I've seen it, I'm really unhappy with the way that they're trying to slice it. So, that's it. Thank you.
I guess we'll bring the applicant back up. It's the Realtor. So we don't have anybody from, or Pat McClafferty or the owner's not here?
No, actually, the owner is out of state,
Okay.
so that's why we're representing her tonight.
So a question I think she had, and I would ask, is there gonna be 2 houses on parcel B, tract 4?
One.
Okay, is there an existing house out there now?
The reason that they divided like the 10 and 10, because they wanted to keep it agriculture, that's basically why it's like that. And it would be 1 house per
10 acres?
10 acres.
Okay, so I may have to bring that young lady back up and ask why she's thinking there's 2 houses on each property. Mrs. Daniels, you wanna come back up? Because I don't see a house already on there, so.
There are 0 houses on any of those properties.
Okay.
None of them.
So what I think they're proposing.
Tract 4 as a whole
Right.
is allotted 1 house. Now that they're splitting it, they want to have 2 houses on what initially should have been 1 property.
So
Which
one
changes,
on-
which
one on
changes,
A, one on B.
and it changes the voting, it changes the number of tenants, it changes the traffic, it changes all of those things, and the reason that I bought over 50 acres was to have no neighbors.
So if you have 50 acres, and 1 parcel, you're allowed 1 house.
Yes, only one.
If you have 5 acre, which is our minimum in the county, if you have a 5 acre or more lot, you're allowed 1 house per 5 acres. So honestly, you could divide your property into 10 parcels.
I can't. I'm not allowed to.
Why?
It's in the contract that we signed when we purchased the property.
Oh,
There are
you
deed
had
restrictions on all of
okay.
it.
But I'm guessing or assuming there's no deed restrictions on tract 4 of this property, correct?
It still belongs to the owner.
Okay. So, if they're allowed to do that, if there's no restrictions, correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie or
Well,
staff?
first off, Mr. Chairman, whatever private contracts they've got, we can't enforce that. We're not subject to that. Our minimum is a 5 acre minimum, so if they're proposing 2 different lots of 10 acres each, well, they could have 2 houses on each. As far as our rules are concerned, we cannot enforce a private deed restriction. That's just a private contract between private citizens. That, we have no right to touch on that one way or the other.
So you're saying Ms. Daniel cannot subdivide her property, or can?
Well,
No, I'm
she's
saying
got
they
deed
all
restrictions.
She said that she can.
Well, that's because they have a private contract, and that's between them. We can't
Okay, so we
enforce
can't
that,
enforce that.
nor can we, overturn that. We have nothing to do with it. We have no authority there. So if Ms. Daniels lives up to her contractual obligations, I'm glad people need to do that. But on the other hand, if she's got a contractual right to stop the others, that's her right, that's not us, we can't do that.
So,
If they follow our regulations, we have absolutely no authority to say, you can't do it, we're gonna enforce our contract. We don't have any role in any of that.
so the owner of track 7 shouldn't be able to buy this other track and subdivide it with a private contract. So they're just
They
saying
can
no.
do it as far as we're concerned, we have no authority
Right.
to do anything with their contract.
So the original developer, are they still around?
Yes, that's the one. That's who I'm representing.
The original developer still owns it. The people that
Yeah.
own 7 are trying to buy 4 and subdivide it for their children. So they want to have 3 votes.
Is that who you bought your 50 acres from?
We all bought our properties from it. Everyone,
So they had a rule in place that they
Every-
can't subdivide theirs, but they're gonna
But it,
subdivide their own?
but the way they had it, it says that the owner of the property of the home can make the changes. You know, she had the right to make changes as time went, you know, throughout the whole process, the seller.
But the people she sells to can't.
I would say if they had an issue, she would listen to us.
in order to do that, you have to have 75% of the votes of all the people who purchase properties in Stone Lane to change anything.
And I think unfortunately to our attorney's process or thought processes, we can't get involved in private contracts or, deed restrictions because that's between y'all and her representing the owner and you being the owner of the 50
And,
acres.
I feel bad about this, I really do, because I didn't, but it's just something that came up, that people on lot 7, they just wanted to buy more. And that's why we're here.
Thank you. Charlie had a great point. We're, as commissioners, aren't responsible for private contracts and private deeds. Or deed restrictions. No authority, thank you.
We might feel responsible.
Yeah, thank you. Authority is the word.
We have no authority.
It's like what did we have with the community, the folks that had the burden of the HOA was placed on them to set up, and then, to enforce the people that, pulled with the driveway. It's a very,
Almost same
very
thing,
similar
yeah.
scenario. Very similar scenario. And I don't want to get into that because, again, we don't deal with HOAs and all that. So my morbid curiosity will have to hang out.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak against or for or anything on this property? We're having some discussion up here as commissioners. Yes, Mr. Cornett.
Roy Cornett, Main Street.
You're shining, Roy.
Oh, yeah, your phone.
You're about to blind us there. Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
He did that on purpose, Charlie.
Interrogation.
The 10-acre rule, sure the reason we want to do that is keep the ag exemption. As of this year, it's fixed to change from the standpoint of property valuation. You've got to have 10 acres of ag use, which means you got to have your driveway and your house yard over and above that 10 acres. Just mention that, folks that are in know that is changing. Yeah, so that's going to be, if you've got 10 acres, minus your yard, minus your driveway, you're no longer going to be eligible for that exemption.
Thank you, Mr. Cornett. Appreciate that.
What about grandfathering?
Other questions, comments? That's probably questions for PVA is what I'd say. All right. Any motions? Yeah, this is FSP 2022-10. Stone. Yes, sir.
I make a motion that we approve FSP 2022-10 based on staff by conditions.
Got a motion by Mr. Garrett.
I'll second that.
Was that Mr. Dan Smith? Second by Mr. Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries.
Opposed.
Oh, we have some opposed?
Opposed.
All right, I'll do a roll call, keep it, so we'll go, Dan Smith,
4.
yes?
Yes.
DeJuan Garrett,
Yes.
yes. James Stone,
I really feel like I ought to stay out of that because that is family property at one time.
do you want to
Can I-
recuse yourself?
Right.
If it's no longer family, you don't
It's-
need to, but if it's still some kind of connection, then yes, you're probably right. But if that was formerly, but not anymore,
Well, it's not anymore.
Then you can still vote.
then you don't need to.
Okay.
I mean, you can if you don't feel like, you know, you can deal with it.
Well,
It's something you already did, but-
I really feel like that, yes.
Yes, okay. Mr. Vest,
No.
Mr. Mifflin,
No.
Mr. Shirley,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So motion carries. You can go ahead and sign the documents there. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate all the community feedback. Next on the agenda, looks like it's the text amendment solar ordinance public hearing. So we'll open it up for public hearing.
That's on zoning. I mean, cell towers.
I can understand that. I can definitely understand that.
All right,
It's all yours, man.
thank you.
You gotta do your due diligence when you buy this property.
I guess just before we dive in, I did want to say this, this draft ordinance that you guys are looking at today is modeled, or, you know, I largely used the model ordinance that the Kentucky Resources Council developed in 2020. So a lot of the language comes from there. What we did is we took that model ordinance and we sort of adapted and tailored it to fit better with our local regs, our zoning districts, things like that. So I did want to, I guess, start with this quote that I have here on the screen from the Kentucky Resource Council about their model ordinance. They say that this model solar zoning ordinance is based upon a review of best practices from across the United States and is tailored to meet the unique needs of Kentucky with the goals of encouraging appropriate siting of solar facilities and protection of the correlative rights of landowners to the use and enjoyment of their lands. And I guess when it comes down to it and the things we're going to discuss with this ordinance, like that is what it's about. It's about, you know, when people want to have solar on their property, how do you go about getting that put in place and how do you get that approved? And then it's also about protecting the rights of neighbors and even in some cases, the rights of the property owner, you know, if they have leased their land to, you know, somebody who wants to use their land at least temporarily for a solar facility. So I'm going to kind of go, I guess, somewhat briefly over what the ordinance has in it. You guys all have a copy that was in your packet. We've had a copy that's been posted on our website, and we have discussed a lot of this before. In section 2.1 of the zoning ordinance, we propose adding several definitions for all of these items that are listed here on the screen. So in general, we call all of these solar energy systems, whether it's, you know, something that's built into your house or something that's mounted on the rooftop, or if you've got, you know, arrays that are mounted on the ground of various sizes. There are exempt solar systems. So in general, those are facilities that are constructed by companies that are under the regulation of the Public Service Commission, are exempt from local zoning requirements. They have their own siting process that they go through with the Public Service Commission. So just the example that I go back to is if KU came in, you know, tomorrow and wanted to build, you know, they had a lease to build a solar farm on someone's property, they would be exempt from local review. Whereas if somebody, you know, a company, let's say a different company that's not under the Public Service Commission, what they would call a merchant facility, came in, that would be under local review. Those applications would come before you all and/or the boards of adjustment.
So Toyota or any of these businesses out at the industrial park want to put in a big array of solar panels, does that come under us or under the?
Toyota, as an example, if they wanted to, that would come to us. The other ones, it would just depend on whether it's a company regulated by the Public Service Commission. This next part, we would place the model ordinance, or the ordinance, under section 2.53. It's currently a section of the ordinance that just simply has placeholder language. We would use this use table that we've kind of gone over before. I'm not going to go over every category. I'll kind of go over some things, some highlights on it briefly. But in general, if you have, if you're looking to, sort of build solar features into your house or commercial business, whatever, or add solar panels to your rooftop, those are accessory uses. And as you can see, unless your property is in a historic district, those are uses by right. We included those as conditional uses in the historic district because any substantial changes to the exterior of a property in the historic district requires approval from the Board of Adjustment, and so these would be treated similarly. By and large, if you've got what the ordinance defines as a small-scale solar facility, anything under 2,500 square feet, you can see from the table in almost all of our zoning districts, those are permitted by right. Once again, the major exception being the historic district. Once you get into the intermediate and larger scale ones, we start to see a little bit more of a distinction in the uses and how they're treated. Once we get into intermediate, which is anything from 2,500 square feet up to less than 10 acres. In a lot of our business zones, those are still permitted by right and would likely come to this board for just a development plan, just like if you had a commercial site and you wanted to redevelop it and put a new business on it. In some of the other districts, our ag districts and residential districts, a lot of those would be conditional use permits. So it would go to the Board of Adjustment, the appropriate Board of Adjustment first to get the use approved. And then if it was approved, it would come to the Planning Commission for that development plan still. The large scale ones, so anything larger than 10 acres, those will all go, as long as it's not prohibited, those will all go to the Board of Adjustment just to get that conditional use permit, and if that is approved, then it would come to the Planning Commission for approval of development plans. Sorry, that's actually the next one. So looking at that kind of gives you all an idea. They'll have to go to most of the large ones, and that's the ones that we would be most concerned about impacts on neighbors, will go to the Boards of Adjustment. And the ordinance spells out a very detailed description of what those application requirements are. They will have to show the Board of Adjustment, the full site plan. They'll have to have, show plans as far as, where the prime farmlands are. So the board can make decisions about things like, how close is this going to be to residential properties? What impact will this maybe have on prime farmland? Things of that nature as they're making their decision. It also requires a detailed decommissioning plan, whereby the applicant has to have a registered engineer, spell out what it would take to remove this development from the site, and as close as can be done, return it back to a natural state. And that's a little bit different than some of our other projects, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that many of these, larger facilities do take place in an agricultural area, and we want to be sure that once the project has met its useful life, that we can return those lands to productivity as we can. So as part of that decommissioning plan, not only do they have to come up with the plan for how that's to be done, but the ordinance also requires them to put up a form of surety, so that we the Planning Commission or the county, city, some appropriate, body has that surety if the applicant or the lessee defaults on their obligation to remove the facility once it's met its useful life, that surety is there to make sure that happens. So with the decommissioning plan and the way the ordinance is written, they have to revisit that decommissioning plan every 3 years and update the costs, and then update the surety amount. So if, 1 year the costs for decommissioning go down, maybe because the salvage value of some of the metal is higher, their surety amount might decrease. If the costs go up for whatever reason, the amount of surety would need to be increased. That's most of the plan. A lot of it would follow, once it gets, assuming that the project gets through the Board of Adjustment period and receives an approval, the development plans would come to you all just like any other development plan. We would review them to make sure that they complied with all of our requirements. The panels were meeting the setback requirements. We were getting entrances in appropriate places, things of that nature. That's my, summary of what the ordinance contains. I don't know if you all have any questions for me.
Any questions for Mr. Summers? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Charlie, do I need to close this public hearing and reopen the commercial landscaping operations, or can I continue?
No, if this is the end of the public hearings on this particular proposed ordinance amendment, then you need to close it and then open it to the next.
Any, Matt?
Well, I was just going to say, sort of procedurally, if you are going to close it, I would prefer if we have a recommendation today. Well, I should say fiscal court would prefer if we have a recommendation today.
Oh, if that's ready for that, then you can still close the public hearing, but then motion second, roll call vote to recommend this amendment or this new ordinance to the fiscal court.
Mark, I've got
Yes, Mr. Cornell, come on up here.
two questions. Historic district, what is that here in town?
Yeah.
Number two, I've got the buildings across here, Main Street, and I came within about 2 months ago, signed a contract to put solar panels on the roof of my building. Was that gonna be in violation of what you're talking about here?
Yeah, I can.
And the other one is what's the cup and peas represent on your?
Yeah, no, those are good questions. Yes, so in Georgetown, Georgetown downtown on Main Street is the only historic district that's in the county. There are obviously, as we've discussed many times, other historic properties, but that is the only area that's covered by ordinances. Basically, the properties that immediately front on Main Street, I think it goes from, blanking on the name, basically from the church on the east end, all the way to.
You got the Catholic Church
Yeah.
to, what, the funeral home?
No, further.
Is it
goes
further
right
over?
Past where that new blue, that big.
The old hospital.
Yeah, but that's sort of the extent of it, is those properties that front on it. I guess the way that the historic district is, I guess the language in it is if there's, what is it, substantial?
It's a significant
Significant
alteration.
alteration.
Historic character, so we have to, if they're on the roof, you can't see them, no. But if you're putting them on the front of the building, yes.
It's on the roof.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, if we can't see it, then it would not require the conditional use permit.
What about your cup and your peas?
The CUP stands for conditional use permit, so those are the ones that would have to go to the Board of Adjustment for approval. The P stands for permitted, so there's no approval needed from the Board of Adjustment, but, if necessary, development plans would have to come to the Planning Commission. Obviously, for rooftop installations, those are not anything that you all would see. Those would just go straight to the, building or electrical inspector. The ones that would come before you all are, the intermediate scale and large scale ones would come to you all for development plan. The N's on the chart, not the NA, but the N's stand for prohibited. So basically, we wouldn't allow for, large scale or intermediate We basically wouldn't allow, in the C1 zoning district, our conservation zoning district, which is largely the floodplain, we wouldn't allow for, you know, ground-mounted solar panel development in those areas.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Any other questions for Mr. Summers? I'm going to close the public hearing for the solar ordinance text amendment. I'll take a motion and a second, and then we'll do a roll call.
This will be recommended or to deny, recommend, to the legislative body.
I will move that we approve the solar ordinance as described by staff.
So I've got a motion by Mr. Mifflin,
Second.
second by Mr. Vest, and again, being that it is a public hearing, we are required to do a roll call. We will start with Charlie Mifflin,
Yes.
Brett Shirley,
Yes.
Mr. Stone,
Yes.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Vest,
Yes, sir.
and the chair votes yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Now, again, it looks like we'll open up for public hearing for the text amendment commercial landscape operations. This is again a public hearing.
Right. This is a simple, straightforward text amendment just to fill a hole in our ordinances. I mean, traditionally, landscape operations have been out in the county. There's a number of them. They've been approved as conditional uses, just as an interpretation that was made years ago by the planning director, and it's followed through to this day. So if we get a commercial, and we had one recently on Lyle Road, so a commercial landscape operation wants to go in A1, it's a conditional use permit just because traditionally that's what it's been. So we want to fill that by adding that definition of commercial landscape operation into our ordinance and add where it's permitted and where it is a conditional use, so we're not open to challenge, you know. So that interpretation is actually based on our ordinance. So it won't be an interpretation any longer, it'll be in our ordinance. So this is the definition, pretty straightforward, just a commercial landscape operation is the sale and or provision of tree, lawn, or landscaping goods and services or ground maintenance to others. Such uses may specifically include A, B, C, D, and E. You can read it. Covers just basically those uses allowed, you know, or traditionally associated with the landscape operation. So we are recommending in our ordinances, we're going to add commercial landscape operations as a conditional use in A1 and as permitted uses in B2, B4, B5, and I1. So those are our commercial zones minus neighborhood commercial. So we're not including it in neighborhood commercial. And then light industrial, just because, I mean, you see sometimes they want to locate in an area that's more industrial, you know, if they have a lot of storage or, you know, trucks or whatever. So permitted use in I1, and then our commercial zones other than neighborhood commercial or downtown. So B3 is downtown, B1's neighborhood commercial. So we left off downtown too, just because we don't want the outdoor storage or trucks or vehicles, surface parking downtown for business. So that's all it is. So we're asking for a recommendation on this, and then we will have to take it to fiscal court and city council and Stadieville and Stamping Ground to get it in our zoning ordinance.
Any questions for Joe? Anyone want to speak in favor, against this, anything, I guess? Yes, sir.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman, Joshua Hart. My address is 401 West Main Street in Frankfort. I'm here as an attorney on behalf of my client, Apex LLC, which operates a commercial landscaping business at 390 Paynes Depot Road. I do not wish to unnecessarily belabor an already lengthy meeting. I am available to speak further in favor of this amendment if necessary, but assuming that there are no questions by the commission or other concerns, I'm content to say that we concur, we agree with the planning director that this would solve to remedy, as he put it, a hole, an extant ambiguity in the zoning ordinance, and would serve to make it clear, appropriate clear to commercial landscaping operations where they may, by permission or as a conditional use, locate their operations in Scott County.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the attorney? Appreciate you staying for such a long meeting. All right, with that being said, anybody else want to speak again?
Just to make it clear, I think this is excellent too. We've wrestled with this thing for, pretty much 42 years that I've been here. Which is why there's been interpretations that yes, it should be, but yet the law really says you don't interpret things into conditional uses. They're listed or they're not. So this is good. It needs to be listed.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. So I will entertain, let me close the public hearing. I will entertain a motion to either approve or decline commercial landscape operations text amendment.
Well, if I could just point one thing out, this really should be headed as a resolution to amend the ordinance that requires an ordinance.
Thank you.
But otherwise, please.
I've got a motion by Mr. Vest. Is this to approve?
Approved, yes, sir.
So I got a motion by Mr. Vest.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Smith, seeing that we only have one Mr. Smith now.
Yeah.
I can call you just Mr. Smith. Again, being a public hearing, we do require a roll call. I'll start, no certain order. Mr. Shirley?
Yes.
Mr. Mifflin?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Vest?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Mr. Dan Smith?
Yes.
And chair votes to approve as well. Thank you, motion carries. Thank you. Looks like we've got one more public hearing, I think. Yes, sir. Open the public hearing for the short-term rental ordinance and zoning ordinance text amendment.
All right, thank you. Once again, this is one that we've discussed previously, so I'm going to try to be brief. As far as the zoning ordinance, there are several definitions that are proposed to be added or changed in the definition section 2.51. There's a minor amendment that you'll notice in your copies to the definition of family. It probably won't, I imagine, will not have any effect on anything either way. We are proposing to add the definition for short-term rental to the zoning ordinance and the definition for unhosted home sharing. Unhosted home sharing is just a different way of saying you are renting your entire house to someone else. We are proposing to sort of house the remainder of this ordinance under section 2.58 of the zoning ordinance, which was recently made available in the last couple of years when the city repealed the group homes ordinance. The ordinance proposes to add that all short-term rentals shall be registered with the Georgetown-Scott County Revenue Commission, and we propose to add the use table that you see there on the screen. And I did want to make a note. I gave you all a copy, an updated copy of the use table up at your desks, because the version of the table that the city included with the version we mailed out to you in the packet was the old version that we had talked about last time. And you'll notice this version, really the main change is there's the note at the bottom, and we added the B3 zoning district, which I had overlooked the last time we had discussed this. So basically, I guess in summary, as far as the zoning ordinance part of it, we are not changing anything about where these are allowed and in what zoning districts. We're really just sort of bringing the information together in the table so that anybody interested in having a short-term rental can easily find the information about what zoning districts is it allowed in or not. Can I rent out the whole house? Can I rent out individual sleeping rooms? That information is just here in one location. There is another part of the, I guess, the ordinance changes, and these are not part of the zoning ordinance. They are part of the city's other ordinances, and I'll kind of go through those since I know we had some questions, probably more about this part of it last time we talked about this than we did about the zoning ordinance part. So the city is going to require, or is planning on requiring, annual registration for the operation of short-term rentals. The section 24-61 outlines, various circumstances under which the director could refuse to issue or renew somebody's short-term rental. You can read through those in your hard copies that you've got in front of you. 24-62 establishes sort of the application requirements. So, what is required on the application form. It establishes a fee of $25 for the application form, and it does mention that as long as the properties are under the same business name and listed on the same application form, there's just a $125 fee. I think a previous version maybe at least implied that it was like a fee per unit. So my understanding from reading it is that if you have 5 short-term rental properties that you're wanting to list, as long as you list all 5 on the same registration form, it's $125 fee. If you list them on 5 different registration forms, you will probably pay $125 total. The registration is good for 1 year from when you apply, so it's not a calendar year. And then a change in ownership, just like sort of like we see with a lot of conditional use permits, a change in ownership does sort of cause the registration. It invalidates the registration. So if somebody else buys a property that has been used for short-term rentals and wants to do that themselves, they need to get their own registration. The next section just requires compliance with local, state, and federal law. The section after that requires registration of the host with the Revenue Commission. So the host may be different from the owner. The host, once again, has to register. The host may be subject to occupational license taxes. Section 24-65 requires that transient room taxes be paid just like any other short-term rental, like a hotel or bed and breakfast. Section 24-66 establishes some duties that are required of the host. They can't basically have more than one contract on a short-term rental at a time. If it's in a residential area, you can't have signs out, advertising the short-term rental. It has to basically continue to look like a house and function like a house. You have to have in the rental unit, the name of the name, phone number, and email address of the emergency contact. And when you host on a service like Airbnb, you have to list the registration number that you would get from the Revenue Commission. 24-67 sort of handles, I guess, how to advertise on the platform. You can only advertise for stays of 30 days, of less than 30 days. The Revenue Commission director can ask hosting platforms to remove non-compliant listings. They can request information from the hosting platforms on a monthly basis. The next section, 24-68, basically requires like all pre-existing short-term rentals to comply with the ordinance within 90 days of its passage and publication. So basically, if you have one now, you would need to register. If the city ends up adopting and publishing the ordinance, you would need to be in compliance within 90 days. You'd have to get that registration. Section 24-69 goes into enforcement and penalties. My understanding is that a lot of this would just sort of fall under some of the code enforcement review. Violations would be considered Class 2 violations. Although it does mention that it's kind of heading off the bottom of the screen on me here. That they can be waived. The penalties can be waived if if a similar violation hasn't been on the same property within the calendar year and the issue is remedied within 7 days. So there's a provision there where you can sort of get yourself into compliance and not have any penalties assessed. And that is the end of my summary of the ordinance.
Thank you, Matt, for your hard work on this. Any questions, comments?
And Matt, when it says you're gonna go with the register with the
The Revenue Commission?
The revenue, is that the same as the business license, or something different?
That's the same place that you would get a business license
But
from.
I'm saying that that's, if you get a business license, that means you're registered, correct?
Incorrect. That's the
Well,
reason I'm here.
well, there's two different registrations. I believe, like, when it talks about the host registering with the Revenue Commission, I believe that is a business license, but the registration for the short-term rental itself is a separate thing. Does that make sense?
No, no.
That's the reason I'm here.
Mr. Cornett, you want to come up? We appreciate all your, I know you've researched this quite a bit, spent some time.
Number one, when they added B3 on, which I raised a question about, and that took care of it. That's the biggest thing I worried about. And Charlie, think about it. I've got the building across the street. I've got 2 Airbnb units in there. I've been in business here for a long time. I've got a license to operate in Georgetown as Cornett Associates. The way it's written, do I or do I not have to get a separate license as a B&B owner? They're talking about, yes, you do have to get a separate license. Now, they have backed off. They're going to charge $25 a unit. They backed off that. But it's still unclear. Is my existing license good enough, which I think it ought to be, like that's talking about, or is it a separate license?
Well, until Matt gave the impression that no, they intend something else, it never occurred to me, like apparently it did to David, that it was anything but you get your business license. You've not been required to, perhaps explicitly before, you have to be clear.
Full disclosure, I'm on the tourism board here, and have been for years, but I'm here speaking more as an owner and a host than the question. So. Think about it, Charlie.
I'll think about it, but that never occurred to me until you asked the question. Well, I could feel David, why'd you ask that question?
And I was gonna ask those I wanna know.
Thank you for staying so late, just to ask those questions.
So would the city council have to determine that?
Honestly, I think that might be a question that's better for the Revenue Commission. I tried too late to see if Scott Hall could attend tonight. He did say that he could not get a prior engagement, but he said he would be willing to answer any questions. So I'm sure if you would reach out to him, he could answer these questions better than I could.
I've raised the question a couple times. He's aware of the question. I'm sure he's soon I go away.
He's mistaken, Mr. Cornett.
We'll have the tourism commission ask that question to the revenue commission. That may carry more weight.
In all honesty, the leadership, tourism staff, revenue commission, they all think that ought to be a separate deal. I disagree.
Business is a business.
That's right.
More revenue.
Have you asked the city attorney or Andrew, because they're the ones I'm assuming drew the thing up.
Well, that's correct. Devon's been involved in it, and she's kind of pushing the same direction. She wants to see this deal.
Because it needs to be explicit in their ordinance. I mean, our definitions, that's not it. You know, their ordinance, it sets up the enforcement and that's where that question needs to be answered.
Think about it, Charlie.
Do you have to hold these properties like in a separate LLC than what you would normally operate under?
Don't have to, and I don't. You know, a lot of people do just for liability shields. I don't. I own mine personally.
I mean, I guess is the logic with the city that this is a way for them to keep up with how many such businesses of
The
this
whole
type?
point of this is the way it is now, Lori Saunders has got no teeth to go after folks that are not paying 3% tax. Just so you know, there's a 1% tax that goes to the state. There's 3% local bed tax, and then of course you got 6% sales tax. So it's 10% tax on these things. So it's pretty healthy revenue coming in on these things. In my particular case, I've got 2 units, and for the last month, my 3% would be $42. When it's drafted, I've got to go through the gyration, generate the check every month, pay whatever a little bit owed. And during the summer, it bumps up some. And Laura said, well, okay, we're only going to pay quarterly, that's fine. That's not really the way the ordinance is written. They want it monthly, but, you know, for a guy like me to have to go through gyration every 30 days, I think it's a little bit, you know, too much of a burden, but that's my opinion. There's several questions about it. I'm gonna be at the city council meeting and raise questions, but Charlie, if you've got any suggestions on why I have to buy a separate license, or what may be my argument against having to buy a second license, I guess.
That hinges entirely upon the way they drafted, the city's ordinance. Again, it's not our definitions and whatnot. That's based on their ordinance.
Well, this is for you guys to deal with here in planning and zoning. But it's a question I bothers me.
Thank you, sir. Any more comments, questions, thoughts? Now, Matt, I'm looking at the paperwork I have. Oh, I see. I've got the ordinance sponsored by the city council members, and then I've got a separate ordinance. One is the ordinance amending Article 2 of the Georgetown-Scott County to define short-term rentals and unhosted home sharing and provide zoning requirements for short-term rentals. Then I also have the ordinance adding a new article to Georgetown Code of Ordinances, providing requirements for the operation of short-term rental units within the city of Georgetown.
Yes,
So that's all part of it.
yes. Yeah, and this is a public hearing for both of,
So with that being,
We're being asked to adopt even what they're doing with their basic ordinance, not just for the zone.
this is the public hearing for both
for
ordinances.
both ordinances, there's actually two ordinances here, Charlie, covering.
Why would we have a public hearing at planning and zoning for a city ordinance that's not planning and zoning? I mean, the addition of definitions and whatnot, sure. Whether or not there's conditional uses or any of those kind of things, sure. But just adding basically their revenue provisions and reporting provisions and like, that's not us. That has nothing to do with us.
The question I have,
Convenience probably, because they're tied
But
together.
but they're required to have those public meetings. Having them doesn't cover the same requirements.
so the question I have is, do we close the public hearing, not vote on this? If you feel like we do not need to be voting on this?
I mean, quite frankly, I was wondering why we're even having, the definitional parts unless we're adding to that, conditional use permits, permitted, prohibited, that kind of thing. Never occurred to me that they're asking us to have public hearings on just, basically their revenue and their regulatory. So that's not.
Here's what I'll do as chair. I would like to continue this until our attorney reaches out to the city attorney and clarifies what we need to be doing with this, and we'll hear this next month.
Are they in any hurry to get any of this?
We've been dealing with this for a while.
Well, yeah, I know.
think so.
And frankly, it always seemed like it was so simple because, again, we've got nothing to do with their regulatory stuff.
Well, I was gonna,
In all honesty, it's the tourism board is wanting to get it all through, so they've got to keep and start going after these folks that are not.
I was gonna say, I mean, at the very least, the part that deals with the zoning ordinance, do we want to
Yeah,
pass on have a vote and pass on a recommendation on that part?
That's perfectly legit because it's a definition to be added to our ordinance. That's obviously our stuff. And it may well be, you might just, because I hate to prolong the pain of this, you could close the public hearing and part of the motion is to recommend the changes to the zoning ordinances as far as these definitions. And, the regulatory ordinance to the extent we have any authority there, which frankly is none. But they can get it and, fly on the table.
So we can approve this to the extent of our authority only.
Yeah, approve the one, the addition
The
to
zoning.
our definitions. That's absolutely appropriate. And then, add, I don't know why we would. And recommend or approve it to the extent we have authority in that area, because I just don't think we have anything there. Any more than they require licenses for cab drivers or, anything like that. That's got nothing to do with us.
All right. Anybody, let me close the public hearing first. So
Please.
close the public hearing. and then I'll entertain a motion, maybe to somewhat language that Charlie just,
Yeah, it's gonna be torture this.
yeah.
Maybe we should take two motions. One would be, to, recommend approval of the amendments to the zoning ordinance to include, the definitions for short-term rentals and, related to whatever. And then the second motion would be, are we sure they're asking for action by us on the other thing? I mean, they're business licenses.
I think more than just wanted the public hearing, since we're here having a public
Yeah, but
hearing on
that's
the
anything to do
zoning.
with us, right?
Yeah, it really does. I mean,
You don't-
they're required to have a public hearing. I mean, good Lord, that's like us saying to the library, why don't you all have a public hearing on the next zone change?
Might not need to.
Or, and maybe they don't even have to have a public hearing, they just wanted to, and then you wrote it to show up. I tell you what, close the public hearing, have a motion and second on the definitions and, the amendments to the zoning ordinance. Don't do anything on the other one, but we can say we had a public hearing. And we entertain, bring people of Scott County and their questions. But I think we need to make a recommendation. If they then say, oh, no, we would like one, and please do, then, we can,
Bring it back to
we'll torture a little bit, but we will have already had the, public hearing.
Okay. So I'll need a motion, and again, there's one that the zoning requirements for the short-term rentals, we'll vote on that.
Yes.
But then the second one, which is the, operations of short-term rental units within the city of Georgetown, we'll not vote on that.
Yeah, not, and, and if
We
for some.
discussed it.
Yeah, we discussed it, we had our public hearing, we did everything that, might otherwise please them, but it, no legal significance here, but we can do the motion on the other one, second one.
So I'll take a motion, on the, zoning requirements for short-term rentals, and
Approve
make it either
definition.
approve or decline, whatever you want.
So moved.
So is that to approve?
Yes.
I got a motion to approve by Mr. Mifflin,
I'll second it.
second by Mr. Stone. We'll do a roll call. Mary Singer's still absent. James Stone,
Yes.
Juan Garrett,
Yes.
Ann Smith,
Yes.
Charlie Mifflin,
Yes.
David Vest,
Yes.
Red Shirley,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. Motion carries. And thank you. We discussed the other one, had a public hearing, but did not vote on the second one. All right. What do we got next? Presentation
yeah.
of the fiscal year budget, drafted budget.
Yes.
I just need well, we discussed it. Thank you, Mr. Cornett. Have a good evening, sir. We discussed it at Monday's workshop. Were there any further questions? I mean, Joe, if you want to go through, because it does say the presentation of,
Yeah,
we
well,
can take a vote.
if you're ready to vote, or I can take questions, I mean, just to summarize, the way the budget process works, since we're funded 50/50 city-county, we have to prepare the budget and present it to both legislative bodies. The county asked for the budget March 15th, which is Tuesday. The city doesn't ask for it until May, so sometime early May. So typically, we get a draft budget and get you approve it. I get it to the county. They either approve it or make changes. If they make changes, then I incorporate those changes to the city's presentation, or what we present to the city. If they don't make any changes, I'll present the same budget to the city. If the city then cuts the budget, county will make reciprocal cuts. So they won't pay any, either side will pay no more than the other will pay. So in the past, it's bitten us, especially with the COVID budget. The city cut our budget, and then we had to kind of take that other half out from the county. So we ended up not having any raises 2 years ago, I guess. But, I mean, we went through it. There's no increase in the budget requests to the city or county this year over last year. So there's a slight increase in planning commission expenses based on an increase in salaries, a slight decrease in benefits, but that's offset by an increase in revenue. So we've had about a $40,000 increase in the budget in office expenses, and then a 40,000 increase in revenues. So it basically offset. So we're gonna request the same amount, actually about $800 less from the city and the county. So, I mean, it's very simple budget, 2 pages. You can see our expenditures or expenses in the first part, our revenues in the second part. Our projected revenues are up from 120 last year, projected to 160,000 this year. That's from development fees, and based on the last 12-month revenue from development fees, they've gone up basically. We had a little fee structure change to our grading fees, so our grading fees have gone up basically. That's where that, and BOA fees have gone up too. So overall, we have a reduction in this, what we're requesting from the city and the county, from 546,837 to 546,065. So I don't.
Do you think the increase in those fees will make up that $40,000 from 120 to 160? That is.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, we had 120 projected last year. We brought in about 130, so we were 10,000 over. Yeah.
So do you think we'll be able to go from 130 to 160 with the increase?
I think so.
Okay.
We'll be
As long
close.
as we get close, that's.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions for Joe? I know we covered this pretty in-depth on Monday. I liked it, I mean, I thought it looked nice, and for anybody to go to, or in our case, legislative body and say we reduced our budget, I don't see why they shouldn't.
Yeah, I wouldn't anticipate
I
there
don't think
being
many,
an issue.
bodies decrease their budgets usually.
But Joe, with the high cost of everything,
Mm-hmm.
fuel, I mean, just everything across the board, office supplies, you're happy with that number?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as you're happy,
I mean,
I'm for it, but
Yeah,
I just feel like we're in for, this year's gonna be tough with everything that's going on and everything's going up. Diesel fuel, $5 a gallon, and this will keep, a gas, $4 will keep rising.
Interest rates going up.
I mean, there's a lot of things there that, I just don't want you to shortfall yourself, really.
I'm comfortable that we can.
I know I had a discussion with some lenders today, and your mortgage rates are up to 5% in 30 years. Heck, they were 3, a year ago.
Not even a year ago.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, you're talking, I had a lender today tell me mortgage rate on a 30-year mortgage is about 5%. And so what that does to our economy is it slows things down. All's not gonna
And
sell.
you add the fuel problem in with
Yeah,
that,
and the cost of
it's
homes.
gonna stop everything.
Yeah, the cost of homes going up, rates are going up, fuel's up. It's,
Groceries, everything.
they predicted a recession in 2020, and it didn't happen. Now we got the pandemic, and it seems like we're well on our way to possibly a recession. And if that happens, I don't think we'll hit that 160.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm okay with the budget,
understand
I just
that.
don't know if it's realistic, and no one has a crystal ball, and if we did, we wouldn't have to work.
There's no way to know,
So, I mean, I'm still okay with it, and again, I mean, people do budgets hoping, and usually some educated guess goes into it, but none of us have a crystal ball. So,
I mean, I have addressed the fuel and the,
I didn't think
heating,
you
cooling,
increased it too
gas
much, did you?
expenses in the building. We have a pretty good surplus that we've built up because we've had a couple positions that weren't filled for, 6 months at a time, so that's built up that surplus. So we do have a decent surplus.
You gotta play a deal.
We've got a rainy day fund to carry us through the year.
Yeah,
So I-
your mileage may be a little light, because it's only going up, 10%, or gas is double the price.
You did say you also had some, from a car if necessary.
Yeah.
We have some.
Yeah, we have
excess funds.
surplus to carry us through if with any unforeseen things in the next year.
Well, there's one thing about it, if you come up a little short and so on, everybody's got to understand, because everybody's gonna be in the same boat.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
So
a fact.
I need a motion to accept the presentation of the fiscal year 2023 draft budget. Need a motion? Motion by Mr. Best.
Second.
Second by Mr. Stone. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed, anybody? Motion carried. Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Election of officers, we discussed this Monday. The slate we had Monday as presented, so let me finish out the year's chair. Mr. Mifflin said he'd like, well, we still need Mr. Best to approve that one. Mr. Mifflin to be our vice chair, and then the executive committee to have those two, myself and Mr. Mifflin, Mr. Best, Mr. Stone, and Mr. Smith, if I remember correctly, because I didn't write down just now. So it'd be the executive committee, wasn't that correct? 3 of you? Yeah. So
I'm already on it, folks.
oh, yeah, but it was just renewing.
Renewing, yeah.
Beyond the game, or continue to be on.
Did you need an additional? I know we
No, we
talked
had
about it. If
4
not,
at
it's
one
fine.
time, but we always needed to have a quorum. So if 2 people can't, or didn't show up, we weren't really technically a quorum, we were only 2 or 4. And so we bumped it up to 5, so at least 3 out of 5 show up, 2 could still be missing, we'd still have a quorum. I don't think we need 6.
I think
5.
you talked about at workshop, Mr. Stone giving up his spot and Mr. Shirley taking it, but I mean.
If you're okay with that, I can do that. Are you okay with that, Rhett? Do you want that? Do you want to be on?
That's up to this
The
gentleman.
executive committee, I mean, we have only met a couple times, it's probably past year, maybe.
Oh, yeah, no, we went over all that part of it. I
Yeah.
just didn't know where I fit in the shuffle, and I'm fine either way. It just depends on you guys.
What,
It doesn't make
you
it to
okay
me.
with it?
Sure.
And the only thing, and, because you teach, right?
It's not a big deal.
Okay,
I
you
mean,
get out early sometimes?
Yeah, 3:30
if needed
or
be?
so.
Okay. Yeah, and that would be like, maybe we'd show up at a 3:30 meeting instead of 4:30 on workshop day, or maybe 5
We-
o'clock, you know, an hour.
Yeah, we try to do them on workshop days,
Yeah,
so
most times.
just meet early, like at 3:30 is what we try to
Yeah, I
do.
mean, if it's anything that's that urgent, I
So
can
then
make
what
it
I'll
happen.
do is revise the slate, myself as chair, Mifflin as vice chair, executive committee to include David Best, Dan Smith, and Red Shirley. So with that being said, all in favor, say aye.
Yeah, that's all right.
Anybody opposed?
If we could, Mr. Chairman, just for the appearance of the record, you could ask for a motion in a second, to accept that slate by acclamation kind of thing, and then we'll get the
Okay,
vote.
there we go, let's do that. And we'll do an individual vote, or that way?
Wait, no,
Roll call.
if it's,
All right,
the
we'll make
motion,
it.
the motion's in slate, it'll be.
Thank you. I need a motion to approve the slate. Motion by Mr. Garrett,
Second.
second by Dan Smith, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Can I do that?
Come on, David, just take a shot. What is the last thing on here? I don't know why I don't remember seeing the settlement.
Okay,
Well,
quick.
yeah,
Is this something off the record?
No, since Joe's pointing this way, and I told him I could make it quick. This is the suit out off of, what is it, Summer Wind Road or the next one?
Cedar Hill, Summer Ridge.
Cedar Hill. It's where we had a phase 2, something was repealed, the approval of phase 2, the preliminary, redistributed the dwelling units. We got a suit by Murphy against a couple of landowners and us. All the other folks have come up with an agreement that does not affect our regulations, does not violate any of our rules. It basically doesn't affect us, except it dismisses the suit that we're in for the time being. Our recommendation is that we approve it because of, again, it deals with them and their interests, and there's some exchanges. They will submit a new plat showing some restrictions and maybe some adjusted lines. But again, it does not affect us, and our recommendation is motion second to approve the proposed Murphy settlement. Again, hopefully all in favor say aye, and they will, and then we'll tell them, they'll execute the document, and then sometime shortly thereafter get that new plan in.
So do we need to have actually a motion?
Yes, because we're a party to the suit.
So let me ask you a question. Is this the one, Nathan Billings, Rob Johnson,
Yes.
yourself? Okay.
Yes.
I was there,
And
remember?
that's, yeah, oh, that's right, yes, you were.
Came on.
Yeah.
Can't believe I remember.
So the sooner we can have a motion second, the happier we're all.
And that will be the revision of the initial plat being approved. So we're making a motion to.
No, what they will do is they will give a new plat that's gonna adjust some of the relative uses among themselves, none of which violate our rules either.
So what are we voting on?
To approve the.
To approve the settlement.
Approve the settlement. Okay, I just want to make sure that everybody understands.
So then the suit itself is dismissed, and that settlement will be approved with the judge, and we'll be done with it.
Gotcha.
How long ago was this?
That's a while ago.
It's been pending, what, a year, not quite, maybe close to it?
Yeah, it was more amount.
Oh, well, we had plats going back all the way to 10, but
Well, I think the initial revocation of the preliminary approvals was probably around 17, but then the issue was.
That's the reason I don't remember
I
it.
was probably the only one.
Probably
Yeah.
in 2020.
yeah, but the suit itself has not gone on for maybe a year now.
Yeah.
There was some time when we couldn't get some of those folks to even talk.
And I was the only one on there, 17.
Yep.
But make part of the motion that we don't blame you for.
Thank you, yeah, make that.
I make a motion to approve the Murphy.
Yeah, the proposed Murphy settlement, yes.
Got a motion by Mr. Best,
Second.
second by Mr. Mifflin, all in favor?
Yes.
Say aye. Anybody opposed? All right, motion carries. We don't have anything else, Jim? I'll make the motion, we adjourn.
So moved.
Excellent.